Je suis déjà live. I have my husband in the background. Hope you're enjoying the live so far with Adel. I promise now I will take all your questions لأنه في كتير ناس دايما بيقولوا لي إنه I don't take all the questions, so this time I'm gonna take all the questions. I promise. يلا I'm gonna add Adel to the convo. وينه عادل شو he didn't connect yet. Let me search Adel. Not yet. I'm still waiting for Adel, guys. قد ايه عمري 37 سنة. يلا. Now I see Adel, so I can add him. Voila. He joined, yes, I know. I hope you're enjoying the talk, guys. Okay, I was just talking to everyone, making sure everyone's connected and enjoying the talk with Adel. Thank you so much for your time, Adel. Really, it means a lot to have you with us today and to be able to address all those questions. And I know I've been asking too many things, but everyone has questions and is worried. Yani. You have to feel with us what we're feeling today. It's so hard on everyone. Anyway, so عادل كنا حكينا على الليرة. I want also to take some questions from people, okay? هلا شوي. في حدا عم بيسأل, is buying real estate a good way to protect our money at the moment?
To be honest, I always refrain from giving financial advice. It really depends on everyone's situation. And it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen to real estate in a country that is also going through economic crisis. So I don't usually give financial advice. I think it depends on everyone's personal situation, liquidity requirements, and asset allocation.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. هلا عادل بين ما عم ننطر للسؤالات يجوا for people to ask questions. I want to know what are the implications of this crisis on the technology sector, given that you were the Ministry of Tech, yani basically. Can you tell us more what would be the implication on this sector?
So clearly, I have a lot of faith in the technology sector. I think the knowledge economy is probably the future of our country. At the end of the day, we're paying a heavy price. We spoke a lot about the financial situation, but we're paying a heavy price for a flawed economic model. We've had an economic model that wasn't producing enough, wasn't exporting enough, and was mostly relying on services and on high interest in banks. So when we came to government, I think one of the priorities I had was to support the growth of the knowledge economy, so it becomes one of the pillars of our economic model. And the reason we have a strong opportunity there is it's actually a sector which is capital light and human resources or human capital heavy. And that's one of our competitive advantage, human capital and talent. So we have Lebanese who are very successful everywhere in the world in technology. And the idea was, let's bring them or attract them back to Lebanon. Let's create an ecosystem or a regional technology hub in Lebanon that can create jobs, that can export services, and that can grow from Lebanon and to the world. It made a lot of sense. We put the plan in place to start that process. And I think this plan is even more relevant now that we need to reinvent the economic model urgently and go back to and build a productive economy that is able to export. So the technology and knowledge economy sector are clearly a chance for this country and the future of the youth and of the economy of this country. And we have the potential, as I said, we have a lot of talent. Now, the effect of the crisis, like in any sector, are very painful because a lot of companies have been, when the inflow and the capital flow has reached sudden stop, and when the banks stopped supplying money to depositors, clearly a lot of those entrepreneurs and companies have paid a very heavy price. And some of them have very viable businesses, very relevant businesses that were successful, but they were just basically deprived of the oxygen, of the funding that they were relying on. But I still think that they can recover much easier than other sectors because, as I said, it's a sector that relies mostly on brain and on human capital, and therefore it's much more nimble. And I hope that we can identify some of those entrepreneurs and companies that are successful, that are viable, that have the potential to grow, and then we can match them with investors either in Lebanon or abroad who are looking for interesting investment opportunities. Because one of the opportunities now is Lebanon has become cheaper. So the cost of doing business in Lebanon is becoming cheaper. And if some of those technology companies have the ability to produce or to work in Lebanon, but to export to the world, and a lot of them have that, then it's actually a win-win, or it's actually a very viable and attractive investment opportunities. And we have to focus on that.
Wow, that gives us some hope, huh? By the way, that's good. And finally, some positive hope these days. But Kamena, we don't have the proper infrastructure for this. Our internet connection is very slow, and it's getting worse. And I don't even know if we're still gonna have internet. So how can we solve this issue, Kamen?
Absolutely. That's clearly that was one of the priorities in our program, which is the infrastructure. Because without infrastructure, you can't do anything. You cannot attract companies to come and establish operation here. You cannot attract entrepreneurs. I mean, we had a really detailed plan, and I will publish it probably soon because I want to make it public so everybody can review it and maybe can become a reference for whoever wants to take that over that file, that dossier. But clearly, infrastructure was a big impediment. But we were making some progress in the last few years. Infrastructure started improving, to be fair, and the sudden hit and the collapse of the country clearly is going to make that even more challenging.
When you
be easy. I think we're going through a very tough situation on all fronts, but there is some silver lining, like all the time. And one of them, in my opinion, is the technology sector. Despite the infrastructure, despite the challenges, this is a sector that I think has the potential to reverse the situation and to grow again because it's capital light. This is very important.
Yeah, and because we have the talents.
We have tremendous talent. I was impressed by the talent. This weekend, actually, I was a judge on the MIT Lebanon Challenge hackathon. And I mean, we had more than 700 participants, I think, more than 70 teams competing. Tremendous talent, fantastic ideas, really very inspiring youth who can translate those ideas and those products into business opportunities that can grow, create jobs, and export. We just need to match them with investors. And this is the type of business, again, because it's mostly virtual, you can base it in Lebanon, anywhere inside Lebanon, and can still export to the world. That's the biggest competitive advantage we have. The talent we have in technology and the fact that you can actually base them anywhere, they can still be very effective and profitable.
Great, because I have a lot of youth on the page who follow my page and who ask me, they don't know what to do with their career now. Some of them are graduating this year, some of them have graduated and they don't have any jobs at the moment. So at least if they can participate in such competitions or propose their ideas or try to work with the diaspora on certain front, that would be always good opportunities for them. Do you think there will be more opportunities like this in the coming months?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure, again, on a positive note, we have to have faith in the Lebanese entrepreneurial DNA and the capacity to adjust to crisis. And I actually really believe, I've seen it myself in the 80s, we've been through very tough financial situation and the Lebanese lira collapsed dramatically. And still, we managed to adjust and to recover. And I really hope that despite the institutional bureaucracy and the failure of the government to tackle the crisis, or of the state as a whole, not just the government, failure of the whole ruling class effectively to tackle the crisis, I still hope that the Lebanese DNA and Lebanese entrepreneur and Lebanese youth will adjust to this crisis and will grab the opportunity and will try to get the best out of the situation, in particular, the cheaper labor cost. That is a major competitive advantage now that hopefully will allow us to recover in certain sectors.
Lahza, I want to take also some questions now, Adel. Okay, India was using this tech model where they outsource their talents locally. For example, call centers in the US for big name companies are from India. Okay, that's not basic. That's not a question. She's just sharing her opinion. What do you think about privatization? Is it a good plan to save the country's economy?
Yes, I mean, again, we have to be selective, but in general, I believe that less state, in particular in a country like Lebanon, is better. We don't do privatization just to monetize the assets and for the government to collect the proceeds. We do privatization to improve the services to the customers, to the citizens, and to create competition and to create better services. And more efficient services. So the first reason, the first motive for privatization is really better services for the population. The government's role is to regulate, to protect the consumer, not to run the business. I think that's my view. The government regulates and protects the interests of the population, and then private companies compete to provide a better service and a more effective service. This should be the case, in my opinion. Having said that, I don't think we should do it in a rush because, one, we want to maximize the value out of the sale of those assets. Two, we should do it probably progressively and gradually. Three, I think it should be done in a very transparent way where you're not just selling the jewels of the crown or the jewels of the family, to interest groups who will end up controlling them. We should do it in a transparent way, in a fair way, and we should actually create a strong popular participation. In most countries, privatization means a portion is allocated to the population, to retail investors, so they feel they're also participating in the wealth of the country and that interests are aligned. So a privatization process is a complex process. I don't think the time right now is right, nor I think the ruling class is actually the most able to produce an effective and fair and transparent privatization process.
Isn't BOT better?
It really depends. I mean, it really depends. BOT typically will be for a new project, and it really depends on the situation. But we have companies that exist that we should privatize, in my opinion. And as I said, to improve the service, but also and create competition, but also to create value for the country. BOT is mostly for new projects where you don't want to spend the money up front. So you appoint a company that will come and invest and then return the asset to the state 20 or 30 years later, but collect the revenue and the profit. So you have different tracks depending on the situation. But in general, I think the private sector is better equipped to provide the best service as long as the government provides the regulatory authorities to control that. And that's one reform, by the way, that I'm puzzled hasn't happened yet, even though neither our government, nor previous government, nor this government have managed to create regulatory authorities in electricity and telecom. This is a given. It's in the law. It's in every ministerial statement, and we still are not there.
By the way, about the electricity plan, if you notice in the government plan, electricity reform was only 4 lines, whereas the electricity makes us lose $2 billion per year, and it was only 4 lines in a full plan, which is really minimal for something that has been making the country lose billions of dollars, right?
Electricity is a huge problem. It's a huge origin of losses, but also bad service. I mean, again, unfortunately, after 20, 30 years, we're still not making any progress on this file. We have a plan that was agreed during our government. I think we need to be very realistic, irrespective of any political positioning. The plan that we have from the previous government doesn't work in the current environment. We're now in a much worse financial situation. The government has defaulted on its payment. We need to save money, more money. So we need a plan that is actually cheaper or less cost. It's inevitable. And again, that's another reform that I suggested on Twitter. We have to implement and execute the electricity plan, but first we need to adapt it to our current situation, which is much worse than a year ago. We can't go with the same plan at the time where we've actually defaulted on our debt and we're in very difficult financial situation. We need to adapt it and make it much cheaper and much more efficient.
And are they working on it, or you have no idea?
I don't think they're working on adapting the plan to the financial situation. I mean, it's common sense. If you are in a much worse financial situation, you adapt such a large plan to your new financial situation. It doesn't look like it's taking place or that there's political decision on that front. And I give a very basic example we're all aware of. In the electricity plan, there is a plan to have three FSRUs. Three FSRUs cost a lot of money. It's a very costly project. We only need one FSRU, maximum two. So in a financial situation like the one we are going through now, common sense and logic will say, well, let's slash the number of FSRUs because we all know we don't need three. So why pay for three if we need one or two? This is the type of common sense and decision and reform that need to be taken, and that I think will project or will offer signs and prove willingness to reform and to make bold and radical decisions, despite any political positioning. This is not a political decision, it's purely an economic decision.
Okay, going back to the point where you were saying that Lebanon has become cheaper, Petra is asking, do you really think Lebanon has become cheaper? People, software developers are an example, are charging in USD. How can we benefit from the depreciation of our lira the way Egypt and Turkey did?
I actually don't think Lebanon is right now cheaper. Clearly, we have inflation and maybe hyperinflation. So it's not yet cheaper. But I think with time, certain services will become cheap, including salaries and the cost of software developers. They'll have to adjust to compete. And I hope that we will see this type of adjustment so we can compete, become more competitive, and attract more business from outside.
Okay, there is someone also asking, probably he's referring here to the Caesar Act. If US sanctions will be in place, no company will jeopardize itself to work with Lebanon. How are we going to deal with this?
To be clear, Caesar and US sanctions are not against Lebanon. They're targeting Syria, not Lebanon. So the Lebanon is not targeted by Caesar or by US sanctions. Lebanese individuals could be if they breach Caesar Act. Unfortunately, as I said it before, US sanctions are respected or followed by every country in the world that deals with dollars, and every country in the world does deal with dollar. So we don't have an option here. Big countries and small countries have to follow the US sanctions to avoid being in breach with the heavy consequences. So Lebanon is just part of that process. But Caesar in itself is not targeting Lebanon, it's targeting Syria.
Okay, clear enough. What about the gold reserves? Can we use the gold reserves in your opinion? We can use them, but do you think it's good to use the gold reserves?
To pay debt? Of course not. I mean, this is like the last line of defense, effectively. And we're not going to use them to pay debt or for day-to-day needs. I don't think in the current situation we should use the gold reserve. This should stay, not in the current situation and not with the current, again, regime or political system. We don't want to waste those gold reserves without in a process like this. I think we should not touch gold for now. And I hope we don't have to touch it ever.
Yeah,
defense.
Some Karim is asking, why doesn't BDL channel the circulation of USD through banks only that would finance in USD solely businesses and thus restrict the demand from speculators at the exchanges who create the panic?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I don't think we can avoid having exchange houses. We cannot just take them out of business. They are also needed for certain people who may not have bank accounts and still need to exchange their money. Not everybody has a bank account. Let's be honest here. But clearly, in a situation where the central bank is trying to control the supply and channel it the right way, I'm also wondering why don't they rely more on the banks and less on the exchange houses that are not properly regulated and are not necessarily the right channel in a situation like this. But are still every Lebanese has a bank account.
But Adel, anyway, people, when they used to take their dollars from the banks, let's say they used to take them from the banks and go to the exchange and exchange it to Lebanese pounds.
Yes.
They were using arbitrage.
But I think it's still a minority. Most people who are taking money from the banks are taking dollars from the bank, are taking it because they need it.
Someone, Imad, is asking, how will our economy be rebuilt in case Lebanese talents leave Lebanon? Because we see that a lot of people are looking to leave at the moment. They are waiting for, يعني بشوف حتى مسحات على انستغرام of people يلا بدنا نسكر ونخلي المفتاح تحت برج الكولا.
Well, I mean, again, we have to be realistic. A lot of people need to pursue. I mean, I did it myself in the 80s. I left the country, and because we were in the middle of a civil war, and I figured that for my own future, it's better for me to build a career abroad. So I cannot come and lecture here and tell people stay in the country. Everyone has to look for his interest, especially in a situation like this, which is extremely challenging, and we have to be realistic. Having said that, again, I think there will always be talent that will either come back at some stage or that will stay. And I hope that this talent will be enough to reverse the curve and to help rebuild. And Lebanon's always been attractive to its diaspora. Most Lebanese who leave want to come back at some stage. So if reforms are implemented, if situation improves, I'm very confident a lot of people will come back quickly.
إن شاء الله, really, إن شاء الله. في ميرنا عم تسأل كمان, if we reach an agreement with IMF, can we be optimistic and hope for an exit from the crisis? And how long will it take? 5 years, 10 years, provided we have good reforms?
Reforms is the key. Again, IMF is the oxygen that we need to get the patient out of the operating room and have him survive. Then obviously that patient needs to get on a better diet, exercise, so he can become healthier. That's the image I would give. So IMF is not enough. IMF is an emergency line that will help us survive and avoid total collapse. But if we don't get our act together, if there are no radical reforms, financial and political, obviously, and economic, if we don't build a new economic model and banking reform, then we're doomed, unfortunately. And remember, this is a bit what happened in the past. We've had Paris 1, 2, 3. All those were actually injection of cash from the international community that were supposed to be followed by reforms. But we missed that opportunity. We took the money and we never implemented the reforms. That's why now the international community is saying no more of that. That's why SAD was linked to serious and radical reforms. And that's why the IMF will never disburse a penny without conditions and without serious reforms. But guess what? Those are reforms that we as a country need and we as a people are asking for. Most of those reforms are something that we are asking for, not reforms that the IMF would impose on us. And I think this is why it's very important to stress the need for reforms and for a government and a system that is able to implement reforms. Okay, no more can. It doesn't work anymore. We've reached the end of the game.
But how long will it take, Adel, basically? إذا عملنا reforms وإجا IMF وإجا SAD وبلشنا نعمل تغييرات اليوم بالإيكونومي تبعتنا, how long?
I mean, I look at the example of Egypt. Egypt went through a very difficult time. They had to devalue their currency. They had to ask for an IMF program. That was, I think, back in 2015 from memory. And
Yes,
the
I do.
a 5-year time horizon is a very reasonable time if we get our act together. I even think it could be less because the Lebanese DNA is pretty resourceful and competent. But we have to implement radical reforms. I mean, something has to change drastically. We can't keep going like that. I mean, I saw it from the inside, as I said. This is a system that has proved it's inept at reforming or at changing. There's a lot of corruption, but there's also a lot of inefficiency. And we can't keep going like this.
It's really sad. What would make them change? I really don't know today. They are not feeling the pressure. يعني اليوم في صرخة ناس، صرخة جوع على الطريق وبعدهم مش عم بيحسوا بهذا الموضوع و they're still doing no change. يعني we're seeing 2 top officials resigning and still بتحسهم بعدهم عم بيتشارعوا على الأرقام وعلى توزيع الخسائر as you said. And while now the priority is to have a unified number and go to the IMF directly.
I think there's a big problem that I've seen. There's no sense of urgency. It's been like this for years, and it's still the case. The sense of urgency is lacking. This is not business as usual. Decisions have to be taken very quickly, and they have to be bold and radical.
طيب عادل بدي أسألك سؤال. How come there is no sense of urgency? If let's say their money is in the banks in Lebanon, aren't they suffering like we are suffering as the citizens today? أو يا ترى هن محولين مصرياتهم لبرا وآخر همهم وهن قاعدين الناس is suffering and watching.
ما بعرف صراحة شو عم يعملوا بمصرياتهم إذا حولون ولا لا. But clearly, one of the issues I mentioned earlier, and it's something I was very vocal on, is we had to implement capital control laws very early on. Every country that goes through a crisis like this, where capital inflow all of a sudden reach a sudden stop, implements capital control. In Lebanon, it's incredible that we have capital control, except that instead of protecting small depositors for their essential needs and stopping capital control and applying capital control to large capital outflow, the opposite happened. The small depositor who is in need of dollars for essential, for health or for education, has to beg for that and negotiate, while other depositors manage to transfer outside large amounts of money. It's unacceptable by any standard. And we still don't have the law, even though the government committed and said they will have a law. When you see how they dealt with this particular issue, which is super sensitive, you kind of lose hope effectively that there is a sense of urgency and that there is a real commitment to implement reforms for the interests of the public.
And someone is writing that that I'm good at what I do, but our financial problem is simply political, replying to our discussion here. So basically they see no sense of urgency, which means that our political corrupted system is kind of secure themselves, and with no capital control, which is the key issue today. And with the informal capital control still out there, they can still transfer money. Okay, maybe not a huge amount, but they can still transfer differently than small depositors, right?
Yes, and I think, as I said, this is unacceptable, and it's a signal of how inept the system has been at tackling the crisis.
I'm sorry, I'm repeating that point because that point is crucial, and it's one of the crucial points to solve our problem, to see where exactly is our problem today. And I can talk from من عبوك العشية فينا احكي economics today, and I can talk about the GDP and the debt and the banks and the banking plan and the government plan. But again, our problem goes back to political, and she's right. The person that wrote it is typically right, because today there are laws to be taken into consideration and they are doing nothing on that front. يعني حتى البنوك, we really all know that shareholders of the banks are people that are politically involved. So it's a whole circle and it's all related together. Sorry, I'm showing frustration today.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Obviously, we focused a lot on the financial situation, economic situation, but the bigger picture is we have a serious political problem, which is a system that, as I said, and as you're saying, is inept and unable to reform or to change, let alone to tackle a crisis of this magnitude.
طيب what kind of population do اليوم عملنا ثورة انه we saw انه قالوا لنا رح يجيبوا technocrat government. شفنا اليوم انه الجوفرمنت mainly فشلت لانه اليوم طلعوا بلان. At the beginning I was very happy with our government. قلت يلا بركي بنعطيهم a chance, but at the end of the day they came up with a plan بس ما عملوا ولا action. So for me فشلوا on what they were doing. What can the people do today?
Again, keep the pressure and increase the pressure. Yes, we needed a technocrat and independent government, not just a technocrat government. Unfortunately, we clearly have, and that's a fact, a government that is still dependent on political parties. So nothing has changed except the people around the table. But the political parties, or some political parties, are still in control with their interests, political agendas, vested interests, and this is why the process is stalling. As we all know, you cannot manage a crisis, or you cannot fight a crisis if you don't have a proper leadership and pyramid structure. We don't have that. This is a system where they all need to agree among each other on every decision, and because of the difference in vested interests and agendas, decisions take forever to be agreed on, and sometimes they never agree.
But I'm seeing that I'm not seeing a lot of إذا بدك نمط بالشارع اليوم. ربطة الخبز I'm sure you saw it إنه هلا ربطة الخبز طلعت من 1500 صار حقها 2000. And prices يعني الانفليشن rate بلبنان صار جنون. يعني you saw it has been circulating on Twitter كمان انه inflation rate above 300% in Lebanon. We became the third highest inflation rate year on year من بعد فنزويلا وزيمبابوي. صرنا أكثر من سوريا. And still I don't see a lot of people on the road, a lot of people fighting for their own needs, for their self respect. يعني بعدني عم شوف الناس عادي انه بشوف فيديو بعدهم عم يمزحوا بهالموضوع، فيديو التايجا او things that are circulating, funny things are circulating on social media, yet no real action on the ground. Why is that?
I honestly don't have an explanation. I think there's a lot of people who are in deep despair. We shouldn't focus on those examples, because to be fair, I think most people are suffering and seriously suffering and have a lot of concerns about their future and their survival effectively, and the survival of their families. How will they react as the situation gets worse and worse? I don't know, but I fear, in my opinion, people will go back to the street, and it's going to get more violent or more difficult, because when people are in despair, what do you expect from them? And despair is coming. The population is suffering beyond anything acceptable, and there's no hope for now, and they don't see any measure or any decision that can reverse that trend. And this is extremely painful, and I think we're going to see, I fear we're going to see some serious reactions, and who can blame them?
Yes, no one can. Anyway, Adel, thank you so much for this talk today. It was really insightful. And رحت الكهرباء.
كمان رحت عند الكهرباء من شوي.
شفت هيدا البلد تبعنا، يعني ما منيح انه قاعده على الفور جي. I knew it. انا قلت لحالي لانه الكهرباء كل يوم عم تنقطع 100 مره بالنهار. So this is to show you ملا بلد، يعني نحن شيء بشرف. People are laughing on the chat. ايه ولا انا دغري حطيت 4G knowing انه الكهرباء عم تنقطع كل 5 دقائق عندي. هلا في ناس الشارع هون is حريري is back، حريري is not back. يعني ما بدنا بقى نحكي اذا حريري is back or حريري is not back. بدنا نحكي ببلدنا، بدنا نحكي بسوليوشنز. يعني this is what we want. ما بدنا نفكر بالزعماء تبعولنا. Thank you Daniel. Thank you for everyone who attended this talk. Sorry بعد ما في كهرباء, so I will have to end it this way. It's funny and it's ironic at the same time. So Adel, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who listened, and thank you, Danielle, for this very interesting conversation.
It will be saved, by the way, for everyone. It will be saved on my IGTV, so you can watch the 2 episodes on the IGTV. And also, I will save it to my YouTube channel tomorrow. We'll download it. We'll share it with you as well, Adil. And please keep us posted on your technology plan. You said that you were going to share a plan on the technology sector. So please keep me posted. I'll share it also. بعمل ستوري or video لأنه I really like what you do وبدنا ناس أكتر مثلك عادل يعني I met you when you were minister and I really enjoyed my talk with you مش لأنك معي هون live session. I really enjoyed and I like people like you. إن شاء الله يجينا ناس أكتر وأكتر مثلك لأنه this is what we need today in our country.
Great
وإيش
people. We have a lot of great people. Again, I think let's keep the faith in the Lebanese potential.
Exactly. Let's keep it. وإن شاء الله خير علينا كلنا. Bye, Adel. Have a great
Bye.
night. Bye, everyone. Ciao.